Welcome back to Reimagine 2020. I'm Yonah Hochhauser, and today I'm glad to be joined by Scott King, Blockchain Product Manager and Initiative Lead at ING. Scott, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Yonah. Yeah, thank you. Very excited to join today.
Now, someone who's unfamiliar with your work, they might be a little taken aback or surprised to hear that ING, a traditional banking, a traditional financial organization, has a blockchain product or product and lead. Tell me a little bit about that. What is the connection between a traditional financial institution like ING and blockchain?
Yeah, no, I can completely understand why people might be a bit surprised at that for sure. No, well, we've actually had a blockchain team at ING for around 6 years now, and yeah, it does. I think it would come as a surprise to some people, but obviously for us, for financial institutions, we really see a lot of potential in blockchain, or specifically DLT, for improving efficiencies in the way that we work. So if you look at a lot of processes that kind of financial institutions have, so for instance, trade finance or something like that, a lot of the processes that we're talking about there are actually ones which have been around for many, many years. So, some of them are pretty much the same now as they have been like 100 years ago, for example. So actually what we really see is with blockchain and DLT is a lot of potential in streamlining some of those processes, making them far more efficient, making them faster. So that's really where I guess ING's interest in DLT comes in. I think we also see potential in the technology in kind of unlocking also new kind of business models and and avenues in that way as well. So through tokenization and that side of it, we can actually, I think what we will see is far more business models coming through that are actually available through the technology.
Well, we'll definitely hit upon these new business models a little bit later in the talk, but for now, let's try to break down how blockchain and DLT could help improve the traditional business models and services that ING already provides to its customers.
Yeah, sure. So you may already be aware of an initiative called Comgo, which ING has obviously been heavily involved with. So Comgo is all around kind of streamlining the trade commodity finance process. And as I say, so really it's kind of looking at things like letters of credit, letters of indemnity, that sort of thing. And as I say, some of these processes are today as they have been for kind of 100, 150 years. And there's a lot of problems that kind of come through that. A lot of it's paper-based. So actually what we have is human error. It's open to fraud. So you may have seen recently in Singapore, there was a fairly big fraud case around the oil trade. Which for us, I think, is making people look more at these kind of solutions. But yeah, so really what Comgo is looking to do is make that whole process much more transparent. Kind of allowing parties to see the process live at every stage. And yeah, like kind of standardizing some of those documents where there is a lot of variation otherwise. So so what we see is that actually it can really kind of speed up the process. It can really help from that side. And it really helps, I guess, with as I say, the fraud side as well, and making sure that what is being received is legitimate.
Well, it definitely makes sense. If someone looks at blockchains and DLT in general, strengths, it seems like this would be a great use case for it. Where it is transparent, it's trustless. There's multiple parties involved with transactions that everyone needs to be able to check. But when it actually is being used, when you guys are actually putting it, the concept into action, are you guys using a public chain, a private chain, permissionless? How does it actually work?
Yeah, so we do tend to use permissioned in what we do. We tend to focus on private blockchains, and there are a few reasons for that. You kind of have the privacy reason, the kind of scalability side as well, but yeah, it tends to be private ledgers that we look at. We try to think of ourselves as kind of agnostic when it comes to actually which platform though, and it's kind of it's dependent on the particular use case. So for instance, for Comgo, as I mentioned, I believe that's Quorum, and then we use a lot of R3's Corda as well. But yeah, it's dependent on the particular use case, but it does tend to be private permissioned.
So right now you're the blockchain project manager and product manager, sorry, and you see an awesome use case pops up, like Comgo, to trade commodities, and so who gives the biggest pushback? Who is it hardest to sell on? Is it the internal company that's a traditional organization that's been working the same way, like you said, for hundreds of years? Is it the other parties that you want to trade with who are used to a certain way of trading? Or is it the government regulators who will say, whoa, what is this new technology? This is complex. We slow the roll here. We need to look into it, see how it works, make sure it's safe. So what is the hardest part when you actually find a great use case for blockchain in traditional finance? Who's the hardest sell here?
Yeah. I think you touched on the right ones there. To be completely honest, and it's kind of a combination. I think governmental regulators is definitely a big one. There's so much. So much that needs to be done there, but we do work very closely with the regulators in trying to keep them abreast of actually what we're doing, the developments there. And I think what we find is actually that they're when they're kept informed, that they will actually be quite on board with the sort of work that we're doing. But that is one angle of it. I think the other angle is I think with financial institutions in general, so ourselves, but we're not alone in that. Other kind of financial institutions, they're kind of very traditional businesses in a lot of ways, and obviously we have a very big innovation department within ING. ING really puts a lot of effort into innovation, and it's something which is very much respected within the organization. But there's also people within that you might have to kind of talk through the benefits of a little bit more and convince a little bit more. So I would say one of the two of those would really be probably where you have the biggest kind of challenges. But yeah, I think the way we deal with that, like I say, is walking through with the regulators, holding their hand a bit, and actually showing them what it is that we're doing, and with internal stakeholders and other banks and that sort of thing. It's really about kind of proving the benefits to each and every party involved, I guess.
Well, I mean, making your job harder is the fact that it's a very, very new technology. I mean, the blockchain's been around 10, 11 years, depending on where you view the start of it. And with any new technology, of course, there are bugs, there's growing pains, as we like to say. And of course, it will get more efficient over time, it'll get more stable over time, more secure over time, but we're still relatively early in the game. So at ING specifically, and also in general, your feel across the financial markets, how much of the blockchain use cases and products right now is, hey, this is a test bed, we're going to put something small on it just to see how it goes, and how much of it is actually and how much of it is, hey, we're willing to take a certain amount of risk here? How much is like, hey, we're putting this amount into it, and we're willing and understand that this might for whatever reason crash?
Yeah. Well, I think from an ING standpoint, we're really kind of past the purely kind of proof of concept stage. I would say the stage where we're dipping our toe in and actually experimenting, as it were. We're really actually now trying to kind of push things through to production. So we do already have applications that are in production. So I mentioned Comgo, but also a project that ING worked on significantly, HQLAX. That's also yeah, that's also live with kind of onboarding companies and things like that. But yeah, that's really our goal this year, is actually to drive more of those initiatives that are in our pipeline through to production now. And I think that's what we're going to see more and more towards kind of, back end of 2020 and into 2021. Because I think, you kind of have this curve of innovation, right? The Gartner curve, and the hype cycle, I think they actually call it. And obviously, for a long time, blockchain's kind of been in this ascendancy when there's lots of hype around it, lots of talk around it. And actually, what Gartner's saying now is that we're slightly in this kind of this what they call the Trough of Disillusionment, and that actually is kind of something that follows all technologies, where the hype, you've gone past the hype a little bit, and actually you have some people are like, well, what's going on with blockchain now? What's actually happening? But this, I think, is now where we'll see this kind of rise up out of that, and we'll see really things get put into production. There was a really nice quote which I heard once, which was kind of like, technology is only interesting once it becomes boring. And I think that kind of, that there's truth in that as well, that now we're getting to know what we're doing with it. We're building applications that are delivering real value rather than things that are just kind of purely experimentational.
Mm-hmm. Well, and for sure, I mean, I for so long, I know I'm the consumer on the retail side, where me as a trader and a hodler, I'm sending even small amounts to a friend or whatever, and my palms get sweaty in those 10 minutes till it arrives. Did I put in a wrong letter? I can only imagine on a big bank scale, that feeling must be. But do you feel now, that you mentioned we're kind of past this hype stage, moving along this hype stage, that when you talk to your superiors about blockchain, is it still like, hey, this is this new thing, I have to explain how it works and then why it's good? Or they already understand the pros and cons of blockchain, and you just have to sell them on the particular product that you're working on and why it'd be better than the traditional product?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it always depends who you're talking to, for sure. But yeah, no, I think within ING, in particular, the stakeholders do really kind of, on the whole, understand the technology now. We've been working with it for quite some time now. There's obviously always kind of varying elements and things that do need to be explained in more detail. But I think, given the innovation emphasis within the company and the amount of time spent working on the technology, I do think people are, as you say, senior stakeholders definitely are, like, kind of understand the value that it brings. And I would say it is more on a kind of use case basis, I think, actually explaining the particular use case. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then on the regulation side, when you're trying to deal with the regulators, is that also a use case by use case side, or are they now, also as the technology matures and as it's been more used by banks like yourselves, they're becoming more comfortable with it, where they now have a template? And a more specific question of mine is it clear to you on the bank side and as the innovation side, is it clear to you what is expected by the regulators to appease them when it comes to blockchain? Or is it you make something new and then you have to go to them and check with them if that fits into their framework?
I think a bit of both. I think to be honest, it does depend on the use case. I think when you're talking about something which is more focused towards kind of the changing a process and making that more efficient, I think that's maybe a slightly easier sell than kind of if you're talking about, for instance, kind of digital assets and custody or that side of it. But I think it's kind of a learning experience together in some ways. It's kind of and that's why, as I say, we try and work with the regulators as much as possible and kind of take them across what we're doing so they actually stay informed. But I think I think it's developing on both sides. Like I think regulators are also kind of understanding more the technology and that side of it.
Mm-hmm. Now, we can't talk about finance right now and blockchain without talking about DeFi. It's very high right now in digital banking. Also, this is however young blockchain is. DeFi is even younger, even more immature. But is this something that's talked about internally at ING and the traditional banks, where they're keeping an eye on DeFi, whether with fear or with interest?
Yeah, I think we definitely stay abreast of it for sure. And I mean, you talk about to answer this, I'd probably go back to your earlier question, and you kind of talk about well, why would banks get into blockchain? Why would they think about that? It seems a bit odd, but I think if you're going to be forward thinking, and if you're actually going to think about continued survival, continued survival, then I think you have to actually embrace new technology. I think you have to keep moving with it, and I think that's something that ING do really well with kind of keeping a focus on innovation, is actually embracing new technology rather than being afraid of it altogether.
And does ING offer custody for digital assets to its clients, and do they plan on it if they don't right now?
So we don't currently, but we are part of an initiative called PICTA, which is actually in the Financial Conduct Authority cohort at the moment, which is like a sandbox environment, and that's actually exploring kind of custody for security tokens. So yeah, that's one that we are part of at the moment. It's not offered to customers at the moment, but we are kind of exploring the whole area of digital assets.
And why aren't traditional banks right now offering custody? Is it because it's just too small of a pie, when in comparable to their real core business that's not worth developing on? Is it the regulatory uncertainty where like, okay, this isn't worth the headache of dealing with KYC and AML for the specific thing, or is it just a lack of know-how, and they're saying we're going to leave this to the developers, to the crypto banks that specialize in this?
Yeah, so I think so from a cryptocurrency side, obviously we don't, as ING, we don't look into cryptocurrency per se, but from a digital asset side, what I could say is, I think as a financial institution, there is so much for every project that we work on. There is so much compliance, so much risk areas that actually have to be looked at when you're actually offering a product out there. So there's a lot of elements that kind of need to come together before you can actually release something like that. So I guess what we are doing now with the kind of PICTA example and the sandboxing, that's really the first kind of movement into that, but there is a lot that comes with that. It's not it's not as easy as us kind of just pushing something like that through. We have to think of a lot of different areas of compliance and risk.
For sure. And when it comes to those sandboxes, obviously those sandboxes are trials, and they don't have to adhere to the same strict regulations as the final product. Right. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say, yeah, exactly. I think for the FCA, it's also their chance to make sure that what is being released is protecting customers as well. So, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the exciting thing about DeFi. I mean, there's a lot of risk involved, and like we said, it is still working out its kinks. But the promise of DeFi is kind of, and the thing that excites me is to take out the bias that has been prevalent in traditional finance for so long. When you're doing traditional loans, traditional investment, traditional mortgages, there's a human factor, and once you include the human factor, there is going to inherently be bias. And is this something that ING is looking at to say whether it's truly decentralized or not, whether it could still be a private blockchain, but to learn some of the lessons, to take some of the tools that take out the human factor and the human bias from traditional lending, and implement that into their own platforms to try to make finance more fair and available to everyone?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you look at, like, for instance, we are part of a specific project around lending and kind of tokenization in lending, and actually what we look at there is kind of very large kind of expensive assets where it would be very difficult for most kind of loanees to actually be able to provide the finance for that. And actually what we find with blockchain DLT is that we can widen that pool massively, and we can offer, and maybe you can't fulfill all of that, but you can fulfill a part of that. So I think tokenization is something which really helps us to do that and helps to make that market more accessible.
Mm-hmm. And building upon that, building upon this idea that a lot of the infrastructure underlying our traditional financial systems are really, really old. They're really outdated. And one of them being, the transfer of monies, remittances, and just large transfer of monies from banks cross borders. Is banks like ING looking at implementing blockchain technology for also cross-border remittances, payments, and just large transfers of money? Because you see on the blockchain where you're transferring $1 billion for like 3 pennies fee. It's mind blowing. Is that something that also ING is looking at as well?
Yeah, well, we are. We are part of Finality Group as well, and Finality Group is with the aim is basically to build out a utility settlement coin, and through doing that, they will build kind of 5 different digital five kind of representations of different fiat currencies, I guess. So yeah, I think the goal of that actually is to, and I think that will solve a huge problem that we have now, which is actually cash on ledger, and that we can have we can have solutions that gain a lot of efficiencies, but then, as you say, we still have these kind of legacy systems that are in the background, whether when it comes to kind of payment and settlement. So yeah, we are part of Finality Group, which is actually working to make that process, to bring that process on Ledger.
Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of talk, and even especially since COVID-19 kind of made everyone work from home, remote purchasing, and put pressure on financial systems. There's been a lot of talk about governments making their own CBDCs, their central bank digital currencies. Has the governments approached you guys for input about what you guys would think? Because obviously, the big banks interact with central banks much more than the consumers do. So have the government actually came to you guys to discuss and get your feedback on how that should look or how that would work?
Yeah, I must admit, I don't know from the side of if the government have approached ING. What I can say from our side is, at the moment, we're not actively involved in building it out, but we are doing a lot of kind of research behind the scenes to actually to help that kind of movement as well. So, for instance, we are kind of working with World Economic Forum on some research they are doing there. We have a lot of our kind of economic papers are also on the possibility of CBDC. But yeah, as of yet, we're not engaged in actually kind of building out yet. So,
mm-hmm. And before we mentioned that, while there's a lot of pros to blockchain, especially in finance, with its trustlessness and its permissionless and its open ledger, but coming with that open ledger also has downsides, especially when you're talking about protecting people's privacy. Not everyone wants everyone to know all their transactions, how much is in their account, and et cetera. And one of the advanced technologies or cutting edge technologies that has the potential to really fix this issue is zero knowledge proofs. Has ING been looking at zero knowledge proofs to kind of implement that in a way to allow with all the efficiencies of blockchain while protecting the privacy of their customers' data?
Yeah, definitely. So this is probably, since I've been at ING, one of the areas I've been closest to. So previously working working in the research team within DLT, we dealt a lot looking at privacy, and now we have a specific initiative actually, which is looking to bring a zero knowledge proof transaction verification system to one of the platforms that we use quite frequently, which is Corda. But yeah, ING has looked into zero knowledge proofs for quite some time. So even in 2017, we released the first iteration, which was zero knowledge range proofs, and that was actually an open source implementation to be used on Ethereum. Following that, the idea of range proofs was basically that you could prove that a figure was within a certain range. So for an example, if you wanted to prove that you had enough to apply for a mortgage or something like that. We then moved on to working on set memberships the following year. And that was more about proving that something was part of a certain asset group or class. So for instance, if you wanted to prove that you were part of a country from the European Union, but not give away any further information. And then we worked on bulletproofs when I just arrived, actually. So, and bulletproofs was basically a more effective implementation of the previous two iterations, and it removed what we call trusted setup, which trusted setup is basically the people that set up the initial kind of zero knowledge proof having some knowledge that would be able to unlock certain secrets, essentially. So we removed this part of that from the implementation. And yeah, now we are basically working on, we're taking that knowledge. So all of that is open source, all of that's available on GitHub. So we're taking that knowledge and we're actually applying it to hopefully use in some of the initiatives that we're running now. So first basing it on the Corda network, to hopefully actually use that in some of our initiatives.
That's very cool. And what would be the benefit to a bank to be able to use zero knowledge proofs? Because historically, customers don't mind sharing with their bank, hey, this is my financial records. If it's going to get me a loan or something, that never has really been a barrier of entry for someone to show the bank their financial history or the like. What would zero knowledge proofs actually open up for banks and their customers?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I think I think in that example, I would maybe disagree a little bit. I would say that probably we give that information because we have to give that information. I think from a consumer side, I think myself at least, I want to give away as little information to other parties as I have to. But I think in the banking context as well, we have as with any financial institution, we have a massive responsibility with any data that we collect, any data that we have. And I think from a blockchain context, and that's not just from consumer banking, but also from like wholesale banking where we have large clients. And I think from a blockchain perspective, that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we use like private networks, for example. And to some extent that limits the problem because you kind of reduce the pool of people that will have access to see certain things. But actually it doesn't kind of get rid of it completely. So an example could be if we're talking about an asset exchange, a secondary market asset exchange where an asset's passed hand multiple times. Now, actually, if I've traded that asset to you and you've gone on to trade it to someone else, I don't necessarily want that person further down the chain to see my suppliers, how much I've bought the asset for, certain things like that. So I think that's really where we kind of see value in zero knowledge proofs is protecting information that actually parties don't want to share in certain transactions, in certain chains of history, and that sort of thing.
If we're going to be having a truly honest conversation, we can't only speak about the pros and the promise of blockchain, but also its cons, because that's how we learn, that's how we go forward, and we improve upon them. So you've been dealing with this technology, you said, since you got there, and you've been trying to innovate there and implement. what specific use cases or what have you learned that you said that you've kind of said, you know what, maybe for this use, it's just better to use a standard database. We don't have to shove in a distributed ledger here.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I think that's a process that we try and follow at ING really is, you know, a lot of people will hear the technology and think, I want to do something with blockchain. I want to do this with blockchain, and they'll come to us with various ideas. And we try and take a step back and we try and analyze the problem first, and we try and look at first, well, what are the core principles that blockchain can help with? You know, transparency, making things far more efficient, and actually taking that use case. Is there a direct need for it? Does using blockchain in this instance help to answer these problems using these core values? I think that's why we kind of have a pipeline before something will get to actually making our process of our process of development, or hitting development. Sorry, that we will first analyze. Yeah, does it hit these core values of blockchain?
Yeah, well, you know, there is so much innovation happening in this space because it is such a promising technology for certain use cases. Have you guys actually realized, okay, maybe the blockchain won't work here, but you've taken certain cryptographic elements of a blockchain and actually applied them to a system that you guys have without actually using a blockchain itself?
That's an interesting question, actually. There's not particularly an example that I can think of which straight away hits that, but what I can say there is as well from my experience working on zero knowledge proofs, it's not something that we've implemented in other areas of ING, but we have kind of tried to educate that through the business as well, because if you take zero knowledge proofs, for example, rather than blockchain, actually blockchain is one kind of use case for zero knowledge proofs. So that the cryptography that sits there, it's kind of it's been known since, you know, the 1980s, for example. So and actually that can be used out of the context of blockchain as well. So that's probably the best example I can think of. But like I say, it's not something that's actually been kind of implemented in ING outside of our team. Yeah.
And you know, we're speaking about all these awesome, you know, products and streamlining of processes. But a lot of these, I mean, almost all of them require the other side, to the third party, to actually implement it on their end as well. So when it comes to bankings interact with other banks an enormous amount. That's you know, that's a very large portion of the transactions is interbank transactions, and especially when it comes to digital assets. How have you felt, you know, that your comparative, you know, person in another bank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, wherever it may be, your counterpart at these banks, do you feel that other banks are as bullish and as innovative on blockchain technology? Are they as optimistic? And do you foresee other banks being potential partners in this growing ecosystem?
Yeah, I think we definitely do. I think it's definitely not just ING that is investing into blockchain. A lot of the projects, pretty much all of the projects actually that we work on, large majority are in consortium anyway. So a lot of the time there will be other partners, other financial institutions that are actually involved. Yeah, I think you do see that some banks are further along that process than others. But I think what we're hoping is the more things that get the more things we can drive to production, the more elements that we can get to that point, will actually demonstrate the value, and from that you have a bit more of a snowball effect and more get involved. But I think it has blockchain has seen a lot of financial institutions invest into it, and it's kind of, for me, it was one of the really amazing, surprising things about coming to work at ING and blockchain is the amount of cooperation and collaboration that you actually see between banks as well. Because, you know, these are large organizations who traditionally don't work together, like don't necessarily work together as such. And for me, that's one of the amazing things about the technology is it's actually brought these huge organizations together and to work together.
Mm-hmm. Now, traditionally, before blockchain, even before the internet, the idea of global money and global transfer of money was a little different than it is today. And historically, the U.S. dollar has been called the global currency, the currency that governments even trade with and make settlements with the U.S. dollar, amongst others. Obviously, the pound and the euro have been very strong, and the yen. But the U.S. dollar has been historically the global currency that trade is settled on a big scale, on a government scale, on a global scale. But in recent years, we've actually seen the U.S. dollar weaken. We've seen the U.S. dollar, whether due to government policy, the U.S. government policy on how they print it, how they give it out, or otherwise, or maybe because of political reasons. But for the first time in history, the majority of trade between China and Russia is no longer in the dollar. Now it's in the euro. When it comes to the banks, big banks that are greatly affected by which currency is the global currency. And before, when I brought up cryptocurrencies, you mentioned banks aren't really so interested in that. We're more talking about blockchain technologies. But as the hierarchy of currencies in the world starts to shift, as they become less stable because of the economic hit due to coronavirus, why are banks, you brushed it off, why aren't banks giving cryptocurrencies a serious look, even if not the specific ones that we have today, which are less stable and maybe more speculative, but the idea of cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, it's at the moment it's the volatility, the amount of volatility that you see in cryptocurrencies. As I say, for now, that's not something ING looks at, and there may be other factors as well, but to my mind, that's probably the largest one, to be honest. But I think, and whether that happens in the future, I can't speculate. To be honest, it's I don't know whether that will happen kind of in the future with banks. But what I can say for now is that kind of we definitely focus more on kind of we're open to digital assets. We really see that as something where which is going to change finance, and as I say, kind of open a lot more models, make things much more accessible, and kind of change where we see kind of very illiquid assets currently become much more liquid and much more tradable.
And when you're saying digital assets, are you referring to digitized properties, or are we talking about digital large debt that's tokenized and traded in between holders?
Yeah, both. I mean, I think as I say, we have an initiative where we look at the whole loan process being digitized and making that much more accessible. But yeah, I think, but I think even things like it's not something that we are looking into now. But if you take housing for example, like things like that, where you have very illiquid assets, like I believe that tokenization will be a route to making that much more open.
Mm-hmm. And especially where banks have historically been the big mortgage givers and to a very illiquid asset. What effect do you think that would have on the banks and on the mortgage business if you were to take an historically very illiquid asset like a house and then suddenly be able to tokenize it and make it more liquid? Would that totally change the whole makeup of how a mortgage field works?
I don't know if it changes like the whole process, but I think it just makes things, as you kind of touched upon earlier, it makes things accessible to a much larger proportion of a much larger pool. It makes things a lot more kind of transparent in the process as well, actually kind of digitizing that process as well.
And I've been speaking to a lot of different projects for this conference, and one of the kind of, I don't want to say buzz phrases, but but a phrase that comes up a lot because I do believe they're trying to do it is banking the unbanked. The blockchain holds the ability to bank the unbanked. Well, you work for the banks. Is that something that the banks are looking into? Is actually utilizing this new technology to make inroads into markets where or into markets where they historically it wouldn't have made financial sense or regulatory sense or even be possible to bank those markets, but now with this new technology, it actually could be possible?
Yeah, it's definitely we've definitely kind of explored it through research and things like that, those kind of areas. I'm trying to think. I don't think that we actually have an initiative at the moment that kind of focuses on that area. But I think you're right. I think the technology definitely holds potential in that, and actually making it much more accessible for those kind of countries where it's it currently isn't. So but yeah, there's not an initiative that I know of at ING at the moment that kind of focuses on that.
And last question before I let you go. You're the blockchain product manager, your initiative lead at ING. When you look at your docket, when you look at all the things you guys are working on, what's the one that excites you the most for the future?
Yeah, that's really, really difficult question.
It could be more than one if you want.
Yeah. I might have to. Yeah, I think. Well, obviously, from a personal side, the project that I work on is looking at zero knowledge proofs. So from my side, I think it's a really, really exciting technology, particularly when you pair it with blockchain. And I think that has great potential because privacy is definitely one of the elements we still haven't we've not cracked yet, I wouldn't say, with blockchain. So for me, that is something that I'm really excited about. We're hopefully we're looking to really offer a solution there to the quarter market, which should help kind of answer some of those questions. From looking away from that, I think for me, things that are exciting are things that push the boundaries of traditional finance, I guess. So I guess the things where we look at kind of digital assets and tokenization and how that can actually just open up things that we don't see today. That would be, I think, the things that I'm most excited about.
Well, I'll give you one more question because you've been answering so well, and it really is a joy to talk to you. I don't want to let you go just yet. There are a lot of students watching this in universities around the world who kind of are stuck at home because their universities aren't open yet because of Corona. You both understand blockchain and the financial institutions as well. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in blockchain? What advice would you give to them to say, learn about blockchain, but you should also do a little research on this because it would really help you to actually implement it when you get out of school?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think what I can say is my route into blockchain at ING, I actually joined coming up to 2 years ago now. I joined with an interest in kind of all nascent kind of technologies, but I didn't have tangible experience in blockchain before then, which I think a lot of people don't, because it's a new technology. So I think really the key is just about be curious, like look into things and be curious and try and find out what you can. Try and keep abreast of the new developments. And yeah, I came into the role because of my experience from a product owner side previously. But yeah, I would don't kind of. I think at ING, when we look at people to work for our team, there is a specific kind of thing we look for, and it's really those qualities about being curious and about wanting to learn and wanting to expand your knowledge. So I would say, don't let not having a experience in a certain topic hold you back in that regard.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us, and for all those students who are curious and don't have experience, I'm sure they gained a lot of insightful knowledge listening to this conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm excited to see what's next for the blockchain team at ING. So for all our viewers at home for Reimagine 2020, I'm Yonah Hochhauser. Thanks for watching.